"You're not what I expected," the man said, barely glancing up from his watch, his voice flat, practiced, the kind that didn't ask questions and didn't wait for answers. And just like that, he stood, straightened his coat, and walked away, leaving Clara Bennett sitting alone at a table meant for two on Christmas Eve. A few nearby diners looked up for half a second, then looked away just as quickly, pretending not to see the quiet humiliation settle over her like the falling snow outside the frosted windows. She didn't chase him, didn't call his name, didn't even move right away, because somewhere deep down, this wasn't new. Just another moment where she had been measured, found lacking, and dismissed without grace. The waiter approached slowly, unsure whether to clear the untouched second plate, and Clara gave a small, polite smile, the kind people use when they're holding their dignity together by a thread. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice steady even if her chest wasn't. "You can take it." Outside, the city glowed in warm gold and red, Christmas lights wrapped around lampposts, laughter spilling from doorways, the world moving forward like nothing had happened, and Clara stepped into it alone, her heels soft against the sidewalk dusted with a thin layer of snow, each breath visible in the cold air as she pulled her coat tighter around herself. She could have gone home, could have ended the night quietly, but something about the silence inside her felt heavier than the winter outside. So she kept walking, past crowded restaurants and cheerful music, until she found a small diner tucked between a bookstore and a closed florist shop, its neon sign flickering gently, almost like it was inviting only those who needed it. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the scent of coffee and something sweet baking in the oven, the kind of place where no one asked too many questions. And Clara slid into a booth near the window, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't ordered yet, just to feel something steady. Across the room, a little girl sat swinging her legs under a chair that was slightly too tall for her, her laughter soft but real, the kind that didn't need permission, and beside her, a man sat quietly, watching over her with a calm that spoke of years, not words, his posture relaxed, but his eyes carrying something deeper, something that had learned not to expect too much from the world. Clara didn't notice them at first, not really, because she was still trying to piece herself back together in the quiet. But the little girl noticed her, her small face turning with a kind of curiosity that wasn't judgment, wasn't pity, just something simple and honest, as if she was looking at Clara and seeing not what was missing, but what was still there. And in that small, unnoticed moment, something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make the night pause, like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something no one else could see yet. The waitress came over with a gentle smile and set a warm cup of coffee in front of Clara, even though she had not ordered yet, as if she understood that sometimes people needed warmth before words, and Clara wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat settle into her fingers, her shoulders slowly lowering as the noise inside her quieted just enough to breathe again. Across the room, the little girl tilted her head, watching Clara with wide, thoughtful eyes, her feet still swinging in a slow rhythm that did not match the music playing softly overhead. And then she leaned closer to the man beside her, whispering something that made him glance up briefly, his gaze meeting Clara's for just a second before he looked away, not out of rudeness, but out of habit, like someone who had learned to give people space even when they needed more. "Lily, finish your milk," he said quietly, his voice calm, steady, the kind that did not rise unless it had to, and the girl nodded but did not look away from Clara, her attention fixed with a kind of gentle certainty that children sometimes carried without knowing why. Clara noticed it then, that soft, unfiltered gaze, and for a moment she hesitated, unsure whether to smile or look down, because adults were used to being evaluated, but children simply saw, and there was something disarming about that. Something that made her feel both exposed and strangely safe at the same time. She offered a small smile, careful, almost uncertain, and the girl's face lit up instantly, like a light being switched on without hesitation, without doubt, and it was so quick, so genuine, that it caught Clara off guard, pulling a quiet laugh from her chest before she could stop it. The man noticed that too, the sound of it, subtle but real, and he glanced over again, this time holding the moment a fraction longer, studying not her appearance, not her clothes, but the way she carried herself, The way she tried to remain composed even when something inside her had clearly been shaken. He had seen that kind of strength before, the quiet kind that did not ask for attention, the kind that stayed standing even when it had every reason to sit down. Lily slid off her chair without asking, her small boots tapping softly against the floor as she walked toward Clara with a confidence that only children possessed, stopping just beside the booth as if she had been invited all along. And Clara blinked in surprise, her hand tightening slightly around the mug before she set it down carefully. "Hi," Lily said, her voice soft but clear, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. And Clara leaned forward just a little, meeting her at eye level, not wanting to overwhelm her. "Hi there," she replied, her tone gentle, steady, something in her voice shifting without her noticing, becoming warmer, more open. Lily studied her face for a moment, not critically, not cautiously, just curiously, like she was trying to remember something she had almost forgotten. And then she smiled again, wider this time, as if she had found it, while behind her, Ethan watched in silence, his expression unreadable, but his attention fully present now, because something about this moment felt different, not loud, not dramatic, just quietly important, the kind of moment that did not announce itself, but stayed. Lily did not ask for permission. She simply climbed onto the empty seat across from Clara, as if the space had always belonged to her, her small hands resting on the edge of the table, her eyes still fixed with that quiet certainty that made adults forget how to pretend. And Clara hesitated for just a second before softening, her shoulders relaxing as she leaned in slightly, meeting the girl where she was instead of where the world expected her to be. "Do you like Christmas?" Lily asked, her voice gentle but direct, and Clara let out a small breath that turned into something close to a real smile. "I do," she said. "I think I just forgot how to feel it tonight." And Lily tilted her head, considering that answer like it mattered, like feelings were something worth understanding, not ignoring. "My dad says Christmas is not about perfect days," Lily continued, glancing briefly over her shoulder toward Ethan. "He says it is about who you sit with when things are not perfect." And the words landed softly but firmly, like something repeated enough times to become truth, and Clara felt them settle somewhere deeper than she expected. She looked up then, meeting Ethan's eyes again, and this time he did not look away immediately, his gaze steady, thoughtful, not intrusive, just present, and there was a quiet acknowledgement there, something unspoken but understood, the kind of respect that did not need to be explained. "Lily," he called gently, his tone calm, but carrying just enough weight to remind her of boundaries, and the girl turned back halfway. "I am just talking," she said, as if that was reason enough, and Ethan exhaled quietly, a hint of something almost like a smile touching the corner of his expression before he nodded once, allowing it, trusting the moment even if he did not fully understand it. Clara noticed that too, the way he chose patience over control, and it told her more than words could have, because people revealed themselves in small decisions, not big speeches. "Do you come here a lot?" Clara asked, her voice softer now, more natural, and Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Every Friday, and sometimes when Dad thinks I need pancakes," she said, lowering her voice slightly on the last part as if it were a secret, and Clara laughed quietly, the sound warmer this time, less guarded, and it filled the space between them in a way that felt unexpected but right. Lily reached out then, gently touching the sleeve of Clara's coat, her fingers small but certain, and Clara stilled for a moment, not pulling away, not questioning, just letting the contact exist, because there was no demand in it, no expectation, only a simple connection that asked nothing in return. Across the room, the soft hum of conversation continued, dishes clinking, coffee pouring, but around their table, something slower unfolded, something quieter, like time had chosen to move differently for just a few minutes, and Ethan watched it all without interrupting, his eyes tracing the subtle shifts, the way Clara leaned in, the way Lily relaxed, the way something unseen but undeniable was beginning to form. He did not name it, did not trust it yet, because life had taught him that not everything that felt warm would last, but he also did not stop it, and that, in itself, was something new. Clara did not realize when her posture changed, only that at some point she was no longer sitting like someone waiting to leave, but like someone who had been allowed to stay, her hands no longer wrapped tightly around the mug, but resting open on the table as Lily leaned closer, her small voice filling the space with questions that were simple but strangely precise. "Do you have a favorite story?" Lily asked, her eyes bright with expectation, and Clara paused, thinking not of grand memories or perfect moments, but of something quieter, something she had almost forgotten. "There was one my mother used to tell me," she said slowly, her voice softening as it settled into something warmer, "about a girl who thought she did not belong anywhere, until she realized she was the place someone else was looking for." And Lily listened without interrupting, her attention steady, her expression thoughtful in a way that felt older than her years. Ethan shifted slightly in his seat, not closer, not farther, just enough to keep them in his line of sight, his presence calm, grounded, the kind that did not intrude but did not disappear either. And he noticed the way Clara spoke, not trying to impress, not trying to prove anything, just offering something real, something unpolished. And it made him reconsider the assumptions he had learned to carry about strangers. Lily's scarf slipped loose as she leaned forward, the soft knit falling unevenly around her shoulders. And without thinking, Clara reached out gently, adjusting it with careful hands, smoothing it back into place with a quiet kind of attention that did not ask for acknowledgement. And Lily stilled for a second, surprised not by the action, but by the feeling of it, the ease, the familiarity, like something she had known before but could not name. "There," Clara said softly, her fingers lingering just long enough to make sure it stayed, and Lily smiled in that immediate, unguarded way again. "You fix things like my dad," she said, glancing back at Ethan as if to confirm it. And he met her eyes briefly, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his expression before he looked back at Clara, this time with less distance than before. "She means you notice things," he added quietly, his voice even, not intrusive, just clarifying. And Clara nodded, understanding more than the words themselves. Because noticing was not about fixing, it was about caring enough to see. The waitress returned with a small plate of pancakes, setting it down between them with a knowing smile. And Lily clapped her hands softly, her excitement contained but present, while Clara instinctively reached for the napkin, placing it carefully in front of the girl before she could spill anything. Another small act, another quiet gesture that did not announce itself, but built something steady beneath the surface. Outside, the snow continued to fall in soft, steady flakes, the kind that did not rush, did not demand attention, but covered everything gently, changing the world without noise. And inside the diner, something similar was happening, not loud, not dramatic, just a shift, a slow unfolding of warmth where there had been none before. And Ethan watched it with a careful kind of awareness, not ready to trust it fully, but no longer willing to ignore it either. Because sometimes the smallest moments were the ones that carried the most truth, and sometimes, without warning, they began to feel like something more. Ethan finally stood, not abruptly, not to interrupt, but with a quiet intention that carried weight without force, and he walked over to the table with measured steps, his presence steady, grounded, the kind that did not seek attention but naturally drew it. And Lily looked up at him with a small smile, as if she had expected this moment all along. "You are making a new friend," he said gently, his voice calm, not questioning, not accusing, just acknowledging. And Clara looked up at him, her expression composed but open, no longer guarded in the way it had been earlier. "She found me first," Clara replied softly, a hint of warmth in her tone that had not been there before, and Ethan gave a slight nod, accepting that answer without needing more. There was a brief pause, not uncomfortable, but full, like a space waiting to be understood, rather than filled, and then he added, "I hope she is not bothering you." His words careful, not because he doubted Lily, but because he respected Clara's space, and Clara shook her head gently. "No, she is actually the best part of my night." And the honesty in her voice lingered between them. Simple, unpolished, real. Lily beamed at that, her small hands resting proudly on the table as if she had accomplished something important. And Ethan exhaled quietly, something in his shoulders easing. Just a fraction, because it had been a long time since he had seen Lily connect with someone so easily, without hesitation, without fear. "We usually sit over there," he said, gesturing toward their booth. Not as an invitation, not as a request, just a statement. But there was a subtle openness in it. A door left slightly ajar, and Clara noticed it. The way he did not push, did not assume, just allowed the moment to exist as it was. I like it here, Clara replied softly, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the table as if grounding herself in the present, and Ethan nodded again, respecting that boundary, not stepping further than he was welcomed. Lily, however, did not understand boundaries the way adults did, and she leaned closer to Clara again, her voice dropping to a soft whisper. He does not talk much, but he listens, she said, as if sharing a secret, and Clara's eyes flicked back to Ethan, catching the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of his lips, a quiet acknowledgement that he had heard but would not interrupt. The waitress returned once more, refilling coffee, her movements slower now, more attentive, as if she too sensed the shift at the table, the way something fragile but meaningful was taking shape, and Clara thanked her with a softness that felt genuine, not automatic. Outside, a gust of wind swept snow across the window, the flakes catching the light before settling, and inside, the warmth held steady, wrapping around the small space. Like a quiet promise, Ethan rested one hand lightly on the back of Lily's chair, not pulling her away, not urging her back, just there, present, steady, and he looked at Clara again, this time not as a stranger passing through, but as someone who had stepped into a moment that mattered, even if neither of them could fully explain why. It is getting late, he said finally, his voice low, measured, not ending the moment, just acknowledging time, and Lily glanced between them, as if something inside her was still unfinished, something she had not yet said, and the air shifted again, subtle but certain, like the quiet before a question that would change everything. The moment did not arrive with music or warning. It arrived quietly, the way truth often does, and Lily turned fully toward Clara, her small hands resting flat against the table as if grounding herself before saying something important, her eyes steady, not playful now, not curious, but certain in a way that made the air around them feel different. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly, and Clara felt something in her chest tighten, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen so directly, and she nodded, her voice gentle. "Of course you can." While Ethan's hand remained on the back of the chair, his posture still, his attention sharpening without him moving closer. Lily took a small breath, her fingers curling slightly against the wood, and then she asked it, simply, without hesitation, without doubt, "Will you be my new mom?" And the words did not echo. They settled, heavy and clear, and for a second, the entire diner seemed to pause, not because anyone had heard, but because something in that moment demanded stillness. Clara did not answer right away. She could not, her mind searching for something appropriate, something safe. But there were no prepared responses for a question like that, only honesty or silence, and her eyes flicked to Ethan instinctively, as if asking for guidance without speaking, but he did not interrupt, did not correct, did not dismiss the question, because he understood something most people did not, that children do not ask questions like that unless something inside them already believes the answer matters. His expression remained calm, but there was a tension beneath it now, not anger, not discomfort, but the quiet weight of a father who had learned to protect without breaking what was fragile, and Clara saw it, the restraint, the respect, the choice to let the moment exist even if it was complicated. "Lily," Ethan said finally, his voice low, steady, not sharp, not corrective, just grounding, and the girl looked back at him for a second, not apologetic, not afraid, just waiting, and he exhaled slowly, his gaze softening just enough to let her know she had not done anything wrong. "That is a big question," he added, and Lily nodded once, as if she already knew that, her eyes returning to Clara, still waiting, still open. Clara swallowed gently, her hands resting against the table, her fingers still now, because something inside her had shifted, something she had not expected to feel again, not in a place like this, not after a night like this, and she leaned forward slightly, lowering herself to Lily's level, her voice quiet, careful, but real. "Why would you ask me that?" And Lily's answer came without delay, without doubt. "Because you stayed," she said simply, and the words landed deeper than anything else that had been spoken that night. because they were not about roles or titles. They were about presence, about the simple act of not leaving when it would have been easier to do so. The room did not react. The music did not stop, but something had changed, something irreversible, and Ethan closed his eyes for just a brief second, not in frustration, not in disbelief, but in recognition, because in all the time he had spent trying to build a safe, steady world for his daughter, he had never once considered that the smallest moments, the quietest kindness, might be the ones that opened the door to something neither of them had planned for. And when he looked back at Clara, there was no distance left in his gaze, only a quiet question, one that did not need to be spoken, because the answer was already beginning to form in the silence between them. No one moved right away, not Clara, not Ethan, not even Lily, and yet everything in the room felt like it had shifted, like the air itself had grown heavier with something unspoken but deeply understood, and Clara's breath caught softly in her chest as she looked at the little girl in front of her, realizing that this was not a question born from fantasy or play, but from something far more honest, something that did not know how to pretend. She glanced down at her hands for just a moment, steadying herself, then back at Lily, her voice quiet, careful. "I think that is a question that takes time," she said gently, choosing her words not to avoid the truth, but to respect it, and Lily listened, her expression thoughtful, not disappointed, not confused, just absorbing, as if she understood that some answers needed space to grow. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, his hands still resting on the chair, his presence grounding but no longer distant, and he stepped a little closer, not to interrupt, but to stand within the moment instead of watching from the edge, his voice low when he spoke. "She means you made her feel safe." And Clara looked up at him, meeting his eyes fully this time, and there was no hesitation in her gaze now, only a quiet recognition of what had happened between them in such a short time. "That matters," he added, not as a statement to convince, but as a truth he had learned the hard way, and Clara nodded slowly, because she understood that too. The weight of being the place where someone could rest, even briefly, without fear of being pushed away. Lily leaned her elbows on the table, her chin resting in her hands, studying Clara again with that same steady gaze. "You did not leave," she repeated softly, as if reinforcing her reason, and Clara felt something shift deeper inside her, something that had been closed off for longer than she cared to admit, because she had spent so much time being the one left behind. She had forgotten what it meant to simply stay. The waitress passed by again, slowing just slightly, sensing the stillness at the table, the kind that did not come from discomfort, but from something more fragile, more important, and she chose not to interrupt, moving quietly on, leaving them wrapped in their own moment. Outside, the snowfall thickened, the streetlights casting a soft glow through the glass, and inside, the warmth of the diner held steady, not just from the heat, but from something less visible, something built in small, quiet exchanges that did not need attention to matter. Ethan finally pulled out the chair beside Clara, not directly across, not creating distance, but not closing it entirely either, and he sat down slowly, his movements deliberate, respectful, and for the first time, they were no longer separated by space, but sharing it, and that alone felt like a shift neither of them ignored. "We usually keep things simple," he said after a moment, his tone even, honest. "Just dinner, just time together." And Clara listened, not hearing an explanation, but an invitation without pressure, the kind that allowed her to choose rather than be asked. Lily smiled quietly, her feet no longer swinging now, her body relaxed in a way that spoke of something settling inside her, something she had been waiting for without knowing it, and the room did not applaud, did not react, but something had changed in a way that could not be undone, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that when Clara looked between the two of them, she no longer felt like she was sitting alone at a table meant for two, but part of something that had quietly made room for her without asking her to prove she belonged. The silence did not break, it softened, like something carefully unfolding rather than ending, and Clara let out a slow breath she did not realize she had been holding, her eyes drifting briefly to the window where snow continued to fall in quiet layers, covering everything without asking permission, and for the first time that night, she did not feel like she needed to rush away from anything. "I used to think staying was easy," she said after a moment, her voice low, reflective, not directed at anyone, and yet heard by both. Until I realized most people only stay when it is convenient. And Ethan listened without interrupting, his posture still, his attention steady, because he recognized that tone, the one that carried truth shaped by experience rather than complaint. Lily looked between them, her small brow slightly furrowed as if trying to understand something larger than her years. And Clara offered her a soft smile, one that reassured without hiding the weight behind it. Tonight was supposed to be simple, Clara continued quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of the cup absent-mindedly. Just dinner, just conversation, maybe something that felt like a second chance. And she paused, not out of hesitation, but because the words themselves needed space. But it turns out, sometimes second chances do not arrive the way we expect. And her gaze lifted again, meeting Ethan's, not searching, not questioning, just sharing something honest. Ethan nodded once, a small movement, but deliberate, and when he spoke, his voice carried that same quiet steadiness. They rarely do, he said. And there was no bitterness in it. Only acceptance, the kind that came from learning to live with what was rather than what should have been. Lily rested her head lightly against Clara's arm, not asking, not announcing, just leaning, and Clara froze for half a second before allowing it, her hand slowly resting over the girl's shoulder, tentative at first, then more certain, as if remembering something her body had not forgotten even if her heart had. The contact was simple, but it carried something deeper, something that neither of them tried to define, because not everything needed a name to be real. Ethan watched that quietly, his expression unreadable on the surface, but beneath it, something shifted, something that had been guarded for a long time, not broken, not forced, just gently moved, like a door that had been closed not out of fear, but out of habit. We lost her mom a few years ago, he said finally, his voice even, not heavy, not dramatic, just factual, and Clara did not react with surprise or sympathy, only with understanding, her eyes softening in a way that did not intrude on the truth of it, because some losses did not need explanation, only respect. Lily did not move at the mention, did not pull away, because for her, the absence was not a story, it was simply part of the world she knew, and Clara's hand remained where it was, not trying to replace anything, not trying to fix anything, just present, just steady. She does not ask questions like that often, Ethan added after a pause, his gaze shifting briefly to Lily, then back to Clara. So when she does, I listen. And Clara nodded slowly, because she understood now, not just the question, but the meaning behind it, the quiet recognition of something that could not be forced, only felt. Outside, the snow continued to fall, steady and soft, and inside, the warmth of the diner held them in a moment that did not demand answers, did not rush decisions, but allowed something else to take shape, something built not on promises, but on presence. And for the first time that night, Clara did not feel like someone passing through, but someone who had, without trying, become part of a story already in motion. The moment did not end with a decision, it settled into something quieter, something steadier, and Clara slowly drew her hand back just enough to meet Lily's eyes again, her voice soft but certain. I do not think anyone can become something that important in one night, she said gently, choosing honesty over comfort. But I do think sometimes people can start becoming part of each other's lives without even realizing it. And Lily listened, her expression thoughtful, not disappointed, because the answer did not close a door, it simply opened it more carefully. Ethan watched Clara as she spoke, not just hearing the words, but understanding the intention behind them, the respect, the restraint, the quiet dignity of someone who did not promise what she could not guarantee. And something in him shifted again, not sharply, not dramatically, just enough to make room for a possibility he had not allowed himself to consider before. We are not in a hurry, he said after a moment, his voice calm, steady, meeting Clara where she was rather than where things could go, and she nodded, appreciating the space in that answer, the lack of pressure, the quiet agreement that some things were meant to unfold, not be decided. Lily smiled softly, her small hand slipping into Clara's again without asking, not claiming, just holding, and this time Clara did not hesitate, her fingers closing gently around the girl's, not as a promise, not as an answer, but as a presence that did not need to explain itself. The waitress returned with the check, placing it at the edge of the table with a knowing glance that said more than words could, and Ethan reached for it out of habit, but Clara's hand moved slightly, stopping just short, not to take over, not to insist, but to share the moment, and for a brief second, they both paused. Then Ethan gave a small nod and let it rest between them, unclaimed, because not everything needed to be divided. Outside, the snow had slowed, the streets now covered in a soft, unbroken white, and inside, the diner felt quieter, not emptier, but settled, like something had found its place without announcement. Ethan stood first, pulling on his coat, then helped Lily with hers, his movements practiced, gentle, and Clara watched, not with longing, not with distance, but with a quiet awareness of something she had not expected to feel again, something that did not rush or overwhelm, just stayed. "We usually come here every week," he said as they moved toward the door, his tone casual, but the meaning beneath it clear, an invitation that did not demand an answer, and Clara smiled, a real one this time, warm and unguarded. "Then maybe I will find my way back," she replied, and Ethan nodded once, accepting that without needing more. Lily squeezed Clara's hand one last time before letting go, her voice soft but certain. "You will," she said, not as a guess, but as a truth she already believed, and Clara stepped out into the cold night air, the snow crunching softly beneath her feet, but something inside her felt different now, lighter, steadier, not because everything had changed, but because something had begun, and back inside. Ethan watched the door for just a second longer than necessary, not chasing, not calling her back, just standing there with the quiet understanding that sometimes the most important moments do not end with certainty, they end with space. And in that space, something real has room to grow.